Good evening, students. This is a short video on Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf, born Adeline Virginia Stephen on January 25, 1882, in London, was an influential English writer and a pivotal figure in the modernist movement of the 20th century. So Virginia Woolf was born in 25th January 1882 in London, and she is a very famous author, right? Influential English writer and pivotal figure in the modernist movement. That was a movement was in 20th century, and she was the pivotal figure of it. And her novels pioneered the use of stream of consciousness. Virginia Woolf is famous for this technique she has used in her novel, stream of consciousness. So stream is a small river, stream is a small river, and then that's a stream of consciousness. That's a when you flow with that stream of consciousness, right? That's move. So that technique is used by Virginia Woolf and explored profound themes of gender, mental illness, right? So that's a mental illness and the nature of time and memory. So that is explored by Virginia Woolf. Now, biography. Woolf was born in a privileged and literary family. So she was lucky because her family was privileged and literary family. Her father was Sir Leslie Stephen, a celebrated editor and man of letters, right? So her father was literate, right? Educated, qualified person. uh, his name was Sir Leslie Stephen, and he was celebrated editor as well. Of course, he was man of letters and editor. And Virginia was largely educated at home. That time was usually people used to take tuition, or uh, they were educated at home most of the time. So as her brothers received formal university education, but she was at home, a disparity that later fueled her feminist writing. Why? Because brothers were sent to university and she was at home. She was kept in home. So that feminism we can see in her writing. It reflects from her writing, right? Okay. Now early life was marked by trauma, including the death of her mother when Woolf was 13, the death of her half sister Stella 2 years later, and sexual abuse by her half brothers George and Gerald Duckworth, which she wrote about later in life. So her early life was very much disturbed, and she was marked by trauma in which she has faced, because at when she was just 13, mother died, and then Stella, her half sister, she died, right? 2 years later, like when mother died, then uh, half sister Stella died, and sexual abuse by her half brothers, and then because father got married, so that both male members, they like so-called brothers, so then she was sexually abused by them, George and Gerald Duckworth. And she has faced in her early life, and that is why Virginia's childhood was very much chaotic or full of tragedies, we can say. So these events combined with the death of her father in 1904, and unfortunately she in 1904 her father died and contributed to her lifelong struggle with mental illness believed to be bipolar disorder. And the girl who has faced a lot in her life, and that's why of course that's a lifelong she struggled with mental illness because of trauma, mental trauma. And it is said that she was facing bipolar disorder. Anyway, now following her father's death, the Stephen siblings moved to Bloomsbury, London. So that when father died, so then they Stephen siblings, Virginia, Stephen. So right. So then the siblings they moved to London, where Bloomsbury, London, and where they formed the group Bloomsbury Group, which was an influential circle of intellectuals, artists, and writers who challenged Victorian social conventions, right? So that was the that Bloomsbury group is famous and made for influential circle of, like, made for intellectuals, artists, writers who challenge Victorian social conventions, because that social conventions were not appropriate. That's why many were against the convention. So she challenged, right? And in 1912 she married a writer and political theorist Leonard Woolf. And then 1912 she married with this man Leonard Woolf, right? And in 1917 they co-founded the Hogarth Press. So husband wife they meet and then they started Hogarth Press, which published her uh, later works and books by other modernists like T.S. Eliot, right? So that press was famous and published her later works and books uh, by other modernists like T.S. Eliot was the famous, and they published his and other modernists' works. Now, Woolf died by suicide. Unfortunately, she died by suicide in 28th March 1941 at the age of 59 by drowning herself in the river Ouse near her home in Sussex. So then she died in the river and leaving a note for her husband expressing her fear of another mental breakdown. And then she has written that she has fear of another mental breakdown, right? Because she suffered a lot, whole life was full of tragedy. So that was there. Now celebrated works. So Woolf's most notable works include novel and pioneering feminist essays. So that's a Mrs. Dalloway, which we are going to discuss, which was published in 1925, chronicles a single day in the life of high society woman Clarissa Dalloway, right? So that's a single day story of Clarissa Dalloway in postmodern world London. Like, though it's modern world, postmodern world, but how Mrs. Dalloway, now she's Dalloway. So that's the record of single day of Mrs. Uh, Clarissa, right? It masterfully uses stream of consciousness to weave together the internal lives of several characters. Means what characters are seemed, what they look, right? But then internal, like their psychology is different, their mental status is different. So that she covered different type of people in London society. And then she has depicted, she has entered into their minds, and then she has written, right, depicted their caught their mind and written about it, including the war shell shocked, right? That was war shell shocked after war, right? And then Septimus uh, Smith, right? So that's a after war, when person is feeling for the war. So that is war shell shocked, and who is suffering from this the disease? Septimus Smith in the novel. So that was the Virginia Woolf. Then next is to the Lighthouse, published in 1927, and that was spanning 10 years. The novel focuses on Ramsay family visits to their summer home in Scotland, and it explores the passage of time, loss, and the nature of artistic creation, largely through the characters' thoughts and perception. That's how life. She tries to explore uh, the life, right, and then how it passage of time, loss, and the nature of artistic creation, how it suffers, right? So that is something about To the Lighthouse. Then Orlando, a biography, that is a fantastical mock biography dedicated to her friend and lover, Sackville West. The protagonist, a young nobleman, lives for 3 centuries, inexplicably changes sex from male to female, experiences various historical periods. So that is something uh, different kind of novel than A Room of One's Own. So that's based on lectures Woolf delivered. This the seminal text of feminism, feminist literary criticism. It famously argues that a woman must have money and a room of her own to be able to write fiction. Okay, so that was there. That the Waves, that last 1931 it was published, and one of her most experimental works. It follows six friends from childhood to old age through a series of romantic poetic monologues that explore themes of identity and community. So that's a Waves is also famous novel. Now, unusual facts in her life. So she wrote standing up. Woolf often wrote at a tall, custom made desk about 3 feet 6 inches high while standing. So she used to write while standing. She reportedly did this because she wanted to be like a painter who could step back from the canvas from for a better view, so that a painter stand up and do painting, right? So similarly she wanted to be like painter, and she would be able to see step back from the canvas for a better view. So she imagines that if I stand and write, so I can imagine in a better way, because I can see the whole scene, something like this. So that was unusual. The Hogarth press was a hand printing operation. So Virginia and Leonard Woolf started the Hogarth press primarily as a hobby to help Virginia with her mental health. So that is why husband started this press. They initially bought a small hand operated printing press and learned to set type and print pages themselves. So they learn and they started printing, right? Often in their dining room. So they started in their dining room. Now she was nicknamed the goat. So that's a nickname goat was bestowed upon her by her family. So she was known as the goat, and her mother was a model for pre-Raphaelite painters. So mother was also talented, and Virginia's mother Julia Princep Stephen was known for her beauty and had posed for several prominent pre-Raphaelite artists, including Edward Burne Jones, right? And then she believed birds spoke Greek. That is something unusual. During a several breakdown in 1904, Wolf suffered from hallucination, including believing that birds were singing in green and Greek, and that King Edward seven, six, right? Seven, sorry, was swearing from behind a shrubbery, right? So that she was thinking that there's a birds, right? That speak Greek, and then they give some message to her, something like. And then her relationship with Vita Sequel West Wolf had a very close, decade long romantic relationship with the writer Vita Sequel West. The novel Orlando is considered by Reed Sequel West's son to be the longest and most charming love letter in literature. So that's a she had a relationship with this man, right? So that is something little knowledge about Virginia Woolf. Thank you so much. God bless you.